of owning a cafe, and of heroic deeds, by Beware the Chistero. Chapter 23, of Predator and Prey, Part 3. Midoriya Inko had never run so quickly in her whole 29 years of life.
Holy shit! I'll call a few pros I used to work with, and we'll get right over there, okay?
There she'd been, laughing and smiling with her co-workers, her sake cup empty, and all of the cupcakes. Wow, Inko-chan, these were so yummy! Gone, her eyes slanting to the clock mounted upon the far wall of the small yet lively izakaya bar. Their party had been held in, her goodbyes and see you on Monday on the tip of her tongue. Thank you, Mitsuki-chan. I've just passed the cafe and it's all locked up. It seems okay, but... Then her cell phone had buzzed to life in her purse, the sound of a silly cat song. Well, what else would she use for the wonderful man who'd been more of a father to her child than the feckless bastard so cluelessly enjoying his life in America, filling the bar and causing her teammates to drunkenly laugh and giggle.
Don't you worry, Ian-chan. I'll be there in 5. You just check on those kids, alright?
When it wasn't Shota's voice that filled her ear, though, all frivolity had drained from her features. It had been Dabi who'd spoken to her. He sounded like he was running. Why? Someone had attacked their cafe? What? Shinso-sama's in danger? Oh god! Aizawa-sama's going to save her by himself! Oh no! He, her son, Hitoshi, and that nice shy Tobra, who Izuku adored with the same reverence he gave to the Nononeko staff and his study group friends, were on their way to her apartment. The teenagers, God bless them, had promised that no one was going to lay a finger on the boys. Then he'd had to go. He'd needed to call the local bro heroes. I'm nearly at the door, Mitsuki-chan. Thank you. She rasped into the phone pressed to her ear, her tears. Oh, but how she longed to be brave, how she wanted to be strong for her child and these sweet, wonderful boys who'd been through enough without seeing her be so overly emotional. I'll see you soon. Opening the door to Midoriya Inko, after he double-checked that it was her, Dabi huffed out a gasp as he was hugged tightly by the woman who hadn't even bothered to kick her shoes off before with a teary smile. Thank you for looking after my boy Hitoshi-chan. She then scuttled past him and into the living room whilst calling, Please lock the door, but look out for Bakugo-san, who'll be here soon. Turning back to the thick barrier and its 2 deadbolts. Sensible though. He found himself hesitating. Loud Cloud and Present Mike had only left a few minutes ago, a tracking device, just as Shouta had said, clever shit, that had fixed onto his phone's signal, leading them away in hand. If he ran, maybe he could catch up with them.
Oi!
Blinking, a clearly gruffled Toma approaching him, Dabi allowed the shorter teen to lean against him.
Lock the door,
he murmured. But
you already can't that.
The younger grinned, their eyes locking.
You getting your ass hauled off by the police isn't going to help anything, is it?
He murmured, his lips nowhere near his chapped, just like the rest of him, thanks to Shota's home remedy, pulling into a frown.
I know that it's hard to stay still, but you want to move, but... He's right,
he reasoned before nodding back into the living space behind them where the 6-year-olds were being coddled, soothed, and reassured.
And besides, what if someone does come by looking for trouble?
He asked.
They need our help right now. Plus, do you really want to miss an opportunity to touch some digging in self-defense?
He quipped whilst trying to smile. Letting out a strained chuckle, Dabi shook his head ruefully. No, I guess not. He breathed while seeing to the locks, a turquoise eye looking back out and into the quiet corridor outside through the peephole. You got his phone?
No, I thought you had it.
The shorter blinked as they walked, his right arm slung over the other's shoulders into the living space where the 3 people they were to protect had nestled into the couch. Shit, he should probably get them a box of tissues or something.
It's there on the coffee table.
Looking to where his partner was pointing, Dabi nodded whilst they approached the couch. Midoriya-san, would you like some tea? He offered whilst Tomura moved to the chair adjacent to the sofa in that small, tidily neat living space, his body slipping into it with a quiet sigh before he carefully picked up the phone, his eyes absent-mindedly checking it over. Oh, yes, thank you. The oldest person of the room breathed, her arms still curled around the boy, snuggled into her sides. He's already poured them both a soda, but... You take sugar? Neither of them had touched their glasses. I think I'll treat myself to 2 spoonfuls, please. In fact, outside of allowing the kindly woman to hold them, they just held each other on the couch whilst they'd awaited the woman's return and any other news. They'd quietly spoken about what else they could do in the kitchen whilst they awaited the pros, and, well, neither of them apparently had spent a great deal of time with young children outside of the cafe. He'd not exactly been allowed to mix with Fuyumi and Natsuo. "You don't live in their world, Toya. You're better. Remember that." Howdy. And they'd not known what to say to them. What could they say? They didn't know who this boss-sama prick was, or what he'd done to Kimiko, or what kind of situation Shouta could have run into with the
Sneaky motherfucker, did they?
shit. But he could make a drink at least, couldn't he? Nodding, he walked through the open paned space and into the kitchen, his hands switching on the kettle before he went hunting for a mug and the tea, his hands working on autopilot whilst he tried to distract himself from the worry eating away from him.
Ow. The call log says that we've contacted All Might. Is that a nickname for President Mike or something?
Blinking out of his thoughts, the kettle having boiled, Dobby quirked a brow at the tone his friend had used, his turquoise eyes looking over his t-shirt-covered shoulder, his brows rising. Did Toma sound worried beneath that rebellious tone?
I mean, Sho doesn't know the real All Might, does he?
They'd never really talked about their home lives or backgrounds. There was a silent understanding shared between them, similar understanding to what he and they shared with Shouta, that they'd talk about such things when they were ready, that living in the moment was all that mattered. But he knew that other wasn't fond of pro-heroes. He'd laughed louder than he'd ever really heard him once when Izuku had told him that with his quirk, he could be an amazing one. "Oh, that's right. You don't usually come by on Sundays, do you?" He remembered looking at him then, and had thought, but did it raise the issue? They'd only known each other for 3 weeks, hadn't they? That the bewildered, disbelieving smile an excuse.
I don't think I'd suit a cape, kid. And a costume would probably make my skin itch.
He'd given to the tot had sounded a little strained. He comes by the cafe ever so often, but I wouldn't say that he knows him, he stated as he walked back over. The steaming mug moved to rest on a coaster atop the coffee table before the now less tearful women. "What do you ask?"
All Might! And I didn't call him, did you?
His partner said, his gloved hands holding the device out for Dobby to see. There was that look again, filing that expression away for later. Could Tomura have an underlying reason for hating All Might? Did he still hate him? No, that was too strong a word for how he now felt about the boisterous symbol of peace, since they'd spoken a few times. It wasn't his fault that Endeavor was breeding children to defeat him. The oldest teen looked to the emerald-haired child. Because if anyone had done such a thing, then surely it was Izuku. Those worried tears were building up again. Damn it, he didn't want to upset the kid. I'm sorry if I wasn't supposed to. The child breathed through a sniffle. I know I should have asked before using it, but I just know that he and all my know will make sure that they're all. He whimpered whilst his mother soothingly rubbed his back. Hey, he said gently whilst moving to kneel next to him. You know we're not exactly fans of pro-hero society at the Noranako, he said, his hands reaching out to grasp a similar trembling one. But, as a customer, I suppose Shouta won't mind having him tag along, whilst he sees to our business, right? Seeing All Might on the call screen, that he'd only been checking to keep himself distracted, he couldn't believe how actually worried he was about the humble, witty, deeply genuine, caring cafe owner. Hell, if it wasn't for the ramifications, he would have contacted Kurogiri to wade in. It had been like a punch to the guys. These people who he'd stupidly come to know, stupidly enjoyed the company of, they knew the man. The symbol Sensei had been training him to destroy since his childhood. Since the terrible day when his father had attacked him and he, out of fear, rage, and betrayal, had killed him and everyone else. All because he'd wanted to play hero. All because he'd idolized All Might. All because All Might existed in the first place, Swallowing thickly, he needed to calm down. He needed to think. He watched Dobby smooth the sawless Midoriya. Damn everything. Why did he have such a soft spot for, actually, all of them, though? That kid. A kid who looked, sounded, and acted like like he had before his monstrous quirk had reared its ugly head and ruined everything. Fuck. He was in way too deep here. He'd been willing to use his quirk and expose himself, potentially throwing away years of work and secrecy. But it wasn't too late to cut these fledgling ties and run, right? He'd not been so stupid as to show the older teenager intelligent, handsome, sarcastic as fuck, and never scared of him. Scared of challenging him, touching him. God, he'd almost forgotten what a hug, a touch, and embrace felt like. It made him hungry for more. He hadn't showed any of them where he lived. Similarly, he'd only ever spoken of his life in short spurts of fractured half-truths. He lived by himself. His uncle took care of the bills. His uncle was all the family he had. He was studying online courses at home. He was going into the family business. His uncle was usually overseas. He had a chaperone if he wanted or needed anything. So he could just back to his apartment, couldn't he? He could forget about the food. Delicious. The laughter, the camaraderie, the feeling of safety, of acceptance, and... Tomini? Blinking. Shit, had he spaced out? The decayed quirk accuser found Hitoshi stood next to his chair, those dark red-rimmed eyes staring up at him. At the look, he tried not to fidget, their gazes locked. Can I sit with you? God damn everything! Scooping the kid up, his pinky fingers pulled away, just in case, just to be safe. He cared, and he didn't want not to! He found himself wrapping the tot in his arms, the boy's head tucked beneath his chin, whilst he cautiously looked to the others. Inko had, somehow, without him even realizing it, gone to the door with Izuku and Dabi. Looking past them, he could see Bakugo-san and some others, more bros, wonderful, in the hall.
You don't want to see anyone besides your mom and Shouta, huh, kid?
He breathed into the child's ear. You looked sad too, Tomoni, the tot murmured. Thank you for being here, he furthered with a sniffle. I know what it's like, to not really have anyone and be sad because of how people see you. The 6-year-old continued, his whisper slowly but surely chipping at the resolve he tried to build. I kinda didn't like All Might either, before I met him. I knew I could never be a hero like him. And he's so bright and sunny. I was actually real scared when he came to the cafe. He sighed. I like heroes like Aizawa-san and Dabini and you the best. What?
I'm no hero, Toshi-kun.
But you are. You are to me. The brave voice quirk user muttered. So brave. If anyone deserved that title, then it was him after what he managed to do tonight whilst he and his partner were forced to just
fucking stand there like idiots!
Those small hands bunching in the fabric of his thinnest black hoodie. You and Dabini, you weren't gonna let that man get away, and you made me feel better. You made me feel safe because you've had to deal with all kinds of not nice things, haven't you? That's what I've heard you say to Dabini when it's just us at the cafe. He breathed. But you've kept going. You're so smart and funny, and no one plays video games like you. He continued softly. I want to be strong like you and them, and I want my mom back, so we can all be there together at the Noroneko, Sucking in a breath to try and calm himself above all else. God, it had been a long fucking time since anyone had made him feel so... Fuck!
Thanks, kid.
He couldn't walk away, could he?
Wait, we'll do that, okay? Tomorrow will be better. Hey, I'll tell your mom how brave you've been too, alright?
You'd have to think about the All Might problem later. Oh! Hello, I'm here with Boss-sama special guest. If you'll be so kind as to let me in. Duping the thug at the door into opening it had been thankfully easy, and although he wouldn't trust Mr. Compress as far as you could throw him, the prick had at least been able to sweet-talk the person who pulled back the eye-level viewing slot to grunt at him and unlock the thick metal barrier. Remember what I told you, he whispered from where he was hidden, thanks to the bastard's overly ornate outfit and the poor lighting across the nightscape behind him, the criminal's wrists still locked in his hand. If you ever think of harming me, those kids, or anyone else, and I hear about it, you'll be sorry, got it? I am Sorry, yes, quite sorry that we haven't been able to meet under more friendly circumstances, my dear. The fiend tittered as the final deadlock gave way with a loud, ominous clang. Good luck, Aizawa. Snorting, he shoved the ridiculous villain hard enough that he'd stumbled a good yard or two out of the way. He needed that much distance just in case he tried to bind him with that quirk of his. Then the second the barrier inched open, he ignited his own power. Whoa! And moved! Grabbing the doorman, 6 foot, muscular, unarmed, surprised by the arm and pulling him into his fist, knocked him out, as it should, and sent him toppling to the ratty carpeted floor. Luckily, there was no one else stationed there, and after a cautionary look around, the longer, fractiously lit corridor was free of an obvious CCTV, and so swiftly but cautiously he jogged down the walkway, his ears straining for anything that'd tell him where to go. The place smelt like cheap perfume, stale booze, and cigarette smoke, whilst overhead, rickety old illuminated bars flickered and clanked. The walls had been hastily papered, some floral patterns stained in places and torn in others, to make it look homey. God! And to think that Kimiko, and who knew how many others, had to suffer in a place like this. But not for too much longer, he thought, his booted feet almost skidding to a stop at the bottom of a stairway. He'd seen no other doors, and Boss-sama didn't seem like the kind of person smart enough to have concealed entrances, ways, and exits, so it looked as though the only way was up. Gritting his teeth, he moved as stealthily as he could, whilst the thrum of music, heavy bass, American, probably, started to permeate the stagnant air. God, all of the windows were barred, the heat was becoming oppressive, and he hoped he wouldn't get sick just from breathing it. So this was why no pro or the police had found this place. On the top floor, at the back of the building, that was no doubt backed by other actually disused spaces, with all points of entry sealed off, bar a few. He didn't think that health and safety would be on the minds of the scummy people behind this place, so he couldn't rely on a fire exit to get out. Wonderful! Who would hear anything? Who would see anything besides the Johns, who no doubt learned of this brothel through word of mouth or the dark web? How many more places like this were there in Musutafu? Drink and hurry up, it's hot as balls in here. Blinking and pressing himself into a shadowed alcove where fire extinguishers should have been housed, Shouta heard a door creak open. Give me some packing while you're at it, from the next flight up. The music wasn't any louder, so perhaps whomever he heard yelling was in a private room. It'd be just his luck if there were, in fact, multiple rooms up there, wouldn't it? Centering his breathing, he looked back down the way he'd come, just to be safe, before continuing up. What he saw when he cautiously peered around the open stairway, the fire doors long gone, was a much longer, wider corridor containing doors, all numbered from 1 to 12, and at the end of the corridor, a set of double doors that spelt out "party" in English. That's where the music was coming from. It looked as though he was going to have to do this the hard way, didn't it? Sighing, he briefly closed his eyes, pictured the layout, and listened. The 12 rooms, if the man he'd just heard was a John, were probably where the sex workers were stationed. That meant that the bastard he was here to see should be in the party room, no doubt getting ready to preen, rant, and rave at him for whatever reason. However, he couldn't just go straight there. He needed to get as many of the illegally operating people out as possible so that they could get away. He wouldn't put it past the pros to call the cops regardless of what Dabi had asked them to do, after all. Shit. Rolling his shoulders, he waited for the music's intensity to build, the thudding sound, the thudding loud enough to mask his footfall and any screaming that might result in his actions before bolting. Kicking open door 1, he found a man mostly naked. Vile! Sat next to a fan in a dingy, poorly lit room, his fat ass slumped on a futon. What? Get the fuck out of here or you'll regret it. He snapped his hand, grabbing at the bastard's arm, pulling him up and shoving him with a yelp into the stairwell. Similarly, entering door 2, he found a woman not much older than him, a cheap kimono wrapped around her as she cowered in a corner. She had a black eye and looked terrified. Please don't. I'm not here to hurt you, he promised, his hands raised. But you need to get out of here now, all right? Blinking up at him, she nodded before her eyes widening. You own that cafe, don't you? She breathed while standing. Kimiko, she... Where is she? He asked, his head moving back of the door to see the disgusting old man cursing and stumbling down the stairs whilst trying to pull his trousers back on. He hoped the prick tripped and fell all the way down those cement steps. Boss, she breathed while approaching him, her lithe form pointing to the party doors. He's been bragging about hurting you and burning your place down.
Has he now?
He's got guards. They're big. They're strong. There's a ton of them. Do they have guns? He asked, his eyes narrowing at the double doors as another song started to ramp up. He could feel the vibrations through the floor. No, but they're quirks. Don't worry. He tried to smile, his body moving aside. I can take care of this. Just try to get out in case the police come, alright? Blinking, sniffling, and nodding, the woman limped past him before with a snarl he was moving again. Police! He yelled whilst kicking each door open in turn. At the yelps, screams, and shouts he heard, he could trust that everyone in those rooms would scarper, which mean there shouldn't be any civilian that could get hurt if this fight got out of hand. So that took care of one problem at least. Then his body stood before the double doors. He rolled his shoulder and pushed through. These bastards weren't going to know what hit them.